Thank you very much, Ian. This is Ron Nixon. We really appreciate you inviting us to the summit, and really glad to have the opportunity for Zach and I and Mike to have our discussion about Sanara with your fellow colleagues that are on the call today. So if you'll advance the slide, Colin. Thank you. So a little bit about Sanara. A lot of you know us because I've had multiple conversations Zach and I have with you, but our focus at Sanara is on improving patient outcomes through evidence-based healing technologies. And one of our overarching goals is that we strive to lower overall costs and improve outcomes through everything that we do. We believe that value-based arrangements, whether it's in the DRG for surgery or whether it's in the future of wound care being in bundles or part of the Medicare Advantage plans, we believe that value-based care is going to be extremely important, and the future for treatment payments will be done through some value-based arrangement. So our markets for our proprietary products and technologies are surgical wounds and chronic wounds in the outpatient settings. And when we say outpatient settings, that's any setting in which a patient is in, whether that's a skilled nursing facility, a home health care facility, long-term acute care facility, etc., or a wound center where we can use our technologies and our proprietary products to advance the healing. So to address these markets, we have put together 6 focus areas for our products. We have a product development team in San Antonio you'll hear more about. We have a diagnostic solution which combines an imager with a bioassay smart pad for wound and skin. And then we have a wound and skin EMR so that the patient and provider can connect, and so that we can capture data, as well as virtual consult, because there's not enough clinicians in the world to be able to treat all these wound patients. So you need to have virtual consult as part of your overall strategy. And then lastly, we're going to take the data from what we collect at the wound bed to develop clinical practice guidelines that'll be done based on the algorithms that we build based on our data that we collect at the wound bed. So if you'll advance it, Kellen. Thank you. So as I mentioned, the 6 focus areas, these areas were developed by us as what we think are the key areas to address for true wound healing. If you look at the industry as a whole has been driven by dressings and coverings and lotions, etc., that are all reimbursed under a predicate device method, which is 510K, which most of you know. And there's really not been a lot of advanced treatments developed over time. Debridement is an area that does have reimbursement, and so it's been used aggressively, in our opinion, and that's been done through sharps debridement, where that's a scalpel removing it, and the surgeon gets paid for that. But we believe that there's also numerous products that can be developed in the debridement, whether they're mechanical or they are a product developed, such like a Sandtail, which is one of the competitors in the market that's been around for about 30 years. And the next generation of those products are needed. Biofilm removal is an area that has been talked about for 15 years, and we're one of the first companies to actually address the removal of that biofilm. And if you look at any of our previous charts about the comparison of our BioCos product to others on the market, we believe we're well positioned to be able to address biofilm removal and the treatment of these microbes in the biofilm. Hydrolyzed collagen is what Celerate is based on. That's as well as our product called HyCol for the advanced wound care market. Obviously, Celerate has been performing, and you're going to hear a lot about that from Zach later. But we also have complementary products in the advanced biologic space, which we think are important. Zach will talk about those later as well. And then negative pressure wound therapy is one of the most highly reimbursed products out there, because it is actually paid for directly by the Medicare number on the patient, so it follows the patient. So it's been historically about 25% to the acute wound spend. we think there are numerous products that can complement negative pressure, and so that is a focus of ours as well. And then we're always striving to find an alternative to hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which has been overused and very, very costly treatment, and not a lot of data that shows that it's effective on all these wounds. So we think that's an area for our focus as well. Kevin, if you'll turn the slide. Zach, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Yeah, I want to talk to you a little bit about our disruptive strategies in the surgical wound space. So just to define, the industry really needs to minimize post-acute care costs and do that while improving patient clinical outcomes. And to kind of give you an idea of how big the market is, it's very large. The surgical wounds are actually the largest Medicare spend in wound care, $11.7 billion, and that includes cost of infections. There are over 15 million surgeries in the U.S. each year, about split evenly between ambulatory surgery centers and hospitals. And then the average published rate of surgical site infection is around 3%. Of course, that's much higher in certain surgical types. And of course, we go after all surgical types. So that's a great thing with the product set we have, is we are able to help each of those different surgical types that do incisions. Our focus is to reduce economic and clinical burden of postoperative wound complications. And that's a big focus because these surgeries are very expensive, and there's a whole bunch of them. As you can see here, there's 370,000 hips, 680,000 knees. There's a very large issue with patient mortality relative to the surgical site problems, and it leads to a 61% higher rate of readmission. And that cost is not little. It's $40,000 just on average for a take-back when they have to go do a reoperation. That number doesn't include the post-operative care costs that happen downstream, the additional stays, the additional nursing visits, et cetera. So very, very large expense. And, that's our goal, to reduce that economic and clinical burden. Future market, we believe in fact, not believe, we see that is growing at a very high rate, 171%, 189% just for hips and knee procedures. And likewise with the revision hips and knees, 140% and 190% growth there. So, and just some of the factors that you guys can all see and imagine in the space for surgery, the comorbidities are growing. We have very many more diabetics. We have a lot more folks that are overweight, smoking, et cetera, et cetera. So the impact of that is felt. The surgeons still need to do the surgery, but they're doing surgeries on patients that aren't very well and don't heal very well. You can advance the slide. In the chronic wound space, the industry is in need of a wound care solution that lowers costs through decreased hospitalizations and improved outcomes. So not too different than what we see in surgical. But we've defined the wound care industry as having some things that are actually missing to this equation. So early accurate diagnosis and intervention, comorbidity recognition and management is missing, education and standard of care for primary providers, their access to the wound care, product and service innovation is weak. Value-based reimbursement models are almost non-existent. The current fee-for-service model incentivizes high-cost treatments. In a Part B billing, Medicare Part B billing, just to talk about that, essentially they acquire the product at a rate and then get reimbursed a set rate. And that space in between is the margin that they make money on. So you can imagine that the more treatments equals more money for those folks that are doing Part B billing. So not really incentivizing healing. And then efficacy and outcomes are not aligned as I just described. The transitional care strategies are lacking versus episodic care. And some of that is because there's no continuum of care ownership of the wound patient. And the treatment plans just don't talk. They are inconsistent throughout the continuum. And some of that is, as you can see, the time frames at which these hospitals, LTACs, that's a long-term acute care facility, SNF, which is a skilled nursing facility, or home health, they are disparate. There's different time frames in which they are both profitable and in which they give care. So those things don't actually go together very well, and so therefore you have inconsistent plans. So what's our solution? On the right side, you'll see technology and services solutions through a strategic vision. So we're going to deliver a diagnostic technology that accurately predicts wound healing, trajectory, and risk. It also provides evidence-based clinical decision support across the continuum of care. The data that's collected from that technology will allow for clinical alerts, for early risk recognition, adverse outcome prevention, reduced hospital readmissions. So that data really will feed the machine so that we can help these patients heal more quickly and more effectively at a much better cost. And again, the product formulary that we've described in the protocols that will come from the data that will help to minimize care variability. And that's another great advantage of this whole package that we're calling the wound ecosystem called WoundDerm. And then the ability to provide timely products to the point of care will help solve some of these issues. And then the clinical and financial reporting will be available to these facilities and to the physicians so they can, manage that piece of their business. And then lastly, the 24/7 access to national wound care specialists through our telemedicine platform will be extremely helpful to these folks to bring all of their levels up to that of an expert. So those folks that maybe don't know as much about wound care can now be brought up to a much higher level by leveraging our experts. And you can advance. Diving deeper into the surgical piece of the business, as of today, as of this time frame of the second quarter, we had 35 field sales managers. We sell in about 590 hospitals and ambulatory surgery centers. Now that's a qualifier. That's trailing 12 months. And the Accelerate Surgical is sold in 27 states in the trailing 12 months. And that is, just a little asterisk around that. That's of states over 50,000. So there are more states that we sell to, but over 50,000, 27 states, $50,000 to be clear. And then the Accelerate Surgical is approved in 1,580 hospitals. And so just to kind of clarify that, between 590 that we currently sell, we obviously want to pick up that additional 990 or so that we don't yet sell in. And so that's a job that we have, and certainly high on our priorities, is to deploy against those hospitals and gain access to those hospitals and meet those doctors that will ultimately use the product in surgery, specifically Accelerate, but also our bone biologics and tissue products. The total market, very large, and that's 6,090 hospitals and 5,700 ambulatory surgery centers. So we have a lot of work to do and a lot of runway, and we're very excited about achieving that as we deploy further. I'm going to pass it back to Ron to go through our comprehensive solution for wound care.
Yep. Thank you, Zach. So the next two slides, you will see the combination of everything that we've pulled together from our proprietary diagnostics. And as you can see, proprietary diagnostics are key and critical to identify these key biomarkers so that we can understand what is going on in the wound bed. Historically, believe it or not, it's been a sight and smell strategy. And so the caregivers are very inconsistent in really understanding what goes on in the wound bed because not using advanced diagnostics. So we believe that this is going to be key and critical to the development of our overall strategies to address value-based care. The virtual consult, as I mentioned earlier, we've developed that for both wound and skin. And the reason we've done that, we think that there are many times and instances where the wound may be a skin condition and people don't understand it. It started as a skin condition, turned into a wound. And so we find that the clinicians in the field have a lot of skin questions that go hand in hand with our wound questions. So we think that virtual consult for both of those is very appropriate. What we're trying to do is complete all of these component pieces so we can launch it as one total package. So we've had some delays just with I don't want to say it's a COVID problem, but as everybody knows, the supply chain got disrupted with many things in COVID, and it really hasn't recovered. And in some of the things like our diagnostic tool, we have circuit boards, et cetera, that are in there and key components that we need. So we're working through that, but hope to have that done in the very near term. Our proprietary products, you'll hear more about those. We're talking about the 6 focus areas, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that in the upcoming slides about what else we are working on and developing. Then EMR, as we mentioned, it's a key and critical component to us because we want to capture that data, but also use it as a communication tool with our app to be able to communicate between the provider and the patient, or a provider and an expert wound care person on the other end. So if you'll advance to the next slide. So this is how we got there. And so we have a buy and build strategy, and the build can be anything from if we can't find something in the market that is appropriate for our overall strategy, then we will develop it. However, we're always looking in the marketplace, and that's evident by Zach's identification of Cyndia and us closing on Cyndia and making that announcement as a complementary product within our focus areas. So we got to the diagnostic and treatment algorithm by looking at many companies out there providing the diagnostics in an early stage. Most of them were about identifying infection, not a lot of detailed biomarkers within that. We came across Precision Healing, which is a number of MIT PhDs that had spun out to develop a diagnostic tool for wound and skin. And we ultimately acquired them after partnering with them and getting the exclusive rights to it. And now we own it and 100%, and it's inside of Sanara MedTech. Same with EMR. The EMR is a combination of, you'll see in the past transactions, you'll see Pixelair and that arrangement. There was a Woundyne that gave us some abilities to advance our EMR system at a faster rate. All of those came in combination. On the virtual consult, we teamed with M Group and Direct Derm, both to provide the coverage across 50 states, which is our goal, to be in all 50 states over time. And then in research and development, we had a longstanding relationship with Rochelle through this partnership that we entered into early with Sanara, and ultimately acquired it in, and you'll see more of their capabilities here shortly. And then obviously the Sanara products include our hydrolyzed collagen and Biocos and many of the Cyndia products, as well as products from our other partner, Cook Biotech, which we can happy to answer questions about as well. Okay, Kellen? So Rochelle Technologies, I just wanted to briefly mention the capabilities that this company has developed. So it's got 12 employees, 9 scientists, engineers, high-performing company. It's the developer of many products historically. And what we asked them to do is over time develop their core capabilities to expand beyond just pure research and development, but also gain a really strong understanding of contract manufacturing, management, supplier development, do all sorts of testing within Sanara that are related to all our product development, and FDA compliance, et cetera, for quality management systems. They've done that over time and really built an outstanding organization there that can support everything that we do, because the vast majority of what we have in terms of products are under contract manufacturing agreements. And so therefore managing that process is key and critical to us. Advance it, Callan. From here, I'll turn it over to Mike McNeil. Mike, if you would provide the highlights from our Q2.
Thank you, Ron. I won't go through all the points on this. We'll save some time for questions and answers. Our year-to-date numbers really tell the same story as well as our quarterly numbers. So I'll just focus on our year-to-date numbers through Q2. So for the 6 months into June 30th, our net revenues of $17.5 million were up 55% compared to prior year. The higher revenues in 2022 were primarily due to our increased sales of surgical wound care products as a result of increased market penetration and geographic expansion, and our continuing strategy to expand our independent distribution network in both new and existing markets. Our SG&A expenses are also up. They were $19.8 million compared to SG&A expenses of $12 million for the 6 months into June 30, 2021. The higher SG&A expenses are primarily due to higher direct sales and marketing expenses. Dropping down to the net loss, for the 6 months into June 30th, we had a net loss of $6.4 million compared to net loss of $2.4 million, due primarily to the higher SG&A expenses, as well as our R&D spending with the Precision Healing tool that Ron had mentioned earlier. And then down at the bottom, we show our cash usage by quarter, our cash balances by quarter. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ron for closing comments.
Okay. I think at this time we'd like to just open it up for questions if there's questions and address what you'd like to hear. One of the things that is a little challenging to describe in detail because of just making sure that we, give you as much information as we can, but also protect our information from competitors, et cetera. And that is that we spend a lot of money in research and development, both at Precision Healing, both and at Rochelle, and those are all predominantly related to, not all, but predominantly related to our advanced wound care project that is going to be for the post-acute marketplace and value-based care. And at the moment in time that we start generating revenue, that will take the pressure off of that, given that it doesn't generate revenue today. But our surgical business is performing extremely well, and we have a very high expectation for continued success in our surgery markets, inclusive of adding additional products that we've done over the last many months. So with that, I'll turn it over, and Ian, if your group has questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
So the first question we have is, how does Accelerate go from approved in the hospital to sold in the hospital? And can you explain the life cycle that maybe goes all around that?
Sure. Zach, you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah. So the idea of approvals, what that means is value analysis committee approvals. So you can imagine that it's made up of hospital doctors and nurses, et cetera, the people that are regularly interacting in the space that maybe is being evaluated. And ours typically goes in front of surgery wound, and those folks will take a look at our products. They look at costs. They look at the value benefit, basically how efficacious the product is, what kind of research we have, and then what doctors are requesting it certainly is of a great importance. The way it works is we would go and find a doctor sponsor. Typically, the doctor sponsor is going to stand up, right? Maybe their support for the product, and then stand up into the meeting and relay the information of efficacy, maybe any experience they have, et cetera. At that point, usually we have a very high rate of approval because the product solves a problem, which I described in the presentation. These wounds are very expensive when they get them, and they're putting typically hardware that's, also very expensive, and they want to make sure to, quote unquote, protect their work. And so our product will complement the biologic processes that really are needed for healing. So that's the idea, and that's why it works. At the point where you get an approval, a typical lifespan to get going is very short. So gain the approval, literally it's the amount of time it takes to place an order and us to get the product in. We can also do what's called a bill-only procedure. That means our rep physically walks the product into the case on approval, gains the PO from the facility, and then the case goes off without a hitch, and we get paid, et cetera. But ultimately, we do like to stock the facility, make sure that the product's available at the need of the surgeon and when they need it. And of course, we train the staff to make sure the staff knows where to find the product and proper application and compliant use.
So hospital approvals for Accelerate have been accelerated in the past year. What is causing the acceleration, and what needs to happen to continue this growth?
So as we've grown as a company, we've gone from a ground up approach where we would identify a facility or a surgeon, do exactly the process I just described. And now as we're growing up, if you will, and gaining more resources, we have added national accounts, a person that goes out and actually contracts at a high level. Also, we've trained all our regional sales managers to do the same at local IDNs and systems. And so we're starting to knock down and retain larger system approvals as opposed to just singular buildings at one at a time or five at a time, depending on how big they are. So we're gaining some that are very large.
I think also to add to that, and Zach, I believe you'll agree with this, one of the things that we've done is continued to gather more and more data, and these surgeons do talk to one another, and the performance of the product has been outstanding. So therefore, the more data we collect, and we've got numerous studies that we have mentioned in the past that will be coming out in support of the product. But I think as I started the presentation with, evidence-based healing is what we're all about. So collecting that data and showing the evidence that the product works will continue to accelerate the program of Accelerate and our complementary products.
Completely agree. Yeah, definitely.
Can you talk in more detail about how the business model will look as Wound Derm gets launched?
We don't actually know, Mike, at this moment in time, because when we launch Wound Derm, yeah, I'm sure that it will be a negotiated transaction with a value-based player and arrangement that will maybe look more like fee-for-service to start with, just because they won't have a full understanding of how to do a value-based arrangement yet on wound care. So we'll let the data drive it and let the evidence drive it as well. And we're perfectly good with that.
Do doctors and hospitals have an appetite to install an additional EMR just for wound care, considering they already have so many systems to use and integrate with?
It's not about integrating. It's really about getting a common API just to connect, to be able to gather the data. They're used to doing this. There are so many common APIs out there for specialty areas of data collection. And many of the primary EMRs out there, so start with Epic and Cerner, they don't know wound care well enough to be able to develop the kind of data collection device that we need. And so there are other EMRs in wound care that are coming out as well, or that are already out there in existence. But we believe that based on the Pixelair history, and I've been used for 15 years in the Canadian market and having many, many thousands of people use it, it gives us a competitive advantage when we launch.
How should we think about the ramp of a BioSurge product next year with a full sales force in place?
I can take that, Ron.
Yeah,
I think that product falls in a category, or at least there's been some other products that have been out there. There is a standard that, really is, there is no standard of products. And I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that what typically happens today is surgeons are very concerned about the closure of any surgical wound. And so what they've typically done is their own cocktail, typically some sort of medicated wash. And I'd say that the most typical standard is maybe like just saline. So we believe that the industry is in need of a standard of care for this type of use. In other words, when they go to close a wound, they would rinse with this particular solution. The solution then kills the ability for bacteria to form and create biofilms and seed to implants. All those things are super problematic for them. And so we think that the market is primed for that, and they're really excited to see some products like this. Now, that said, it's always the challenge of gaining access into the facility. So I think there will be an acceptance timeframe where we need to go out and get surgeons to support us, do the same process I mentioned for value analysis committees. And that's typically been somewhere in the range of 6 to 9 months. So that's probably a good way to think about how that adoption may occur. But we do have people that have expressed the need for this type of product and currently don't have a solution.
and we're also hopeful that with the performance Accelerate, that will advance the timeline as well, but you just never know.
Yeah, I think it's a great complement to Accelerate. I think it's one thing we do know is that, the same issue they're trying to solve with the biologic process, they're also trying to solve with the knockdown of bacteria.
So how do you look at the competitive landscape for Accelerate at the moment?
I can take that. So Accelerate is a one-of-a-kind hydrolyzed collagen in surgery. There are no competitors that have hydrolyzed collagen. And the reason that's important is the effectiveness that it has on an immediate basis for the wound. And I don't need to give you a science lesson, but the native collagens that exist out in the market have been the predecessors to Accelerate, and they're slow to work. In other words, they have to be broken down and be hydrolyzed in order to be activated. And there's a lot of data, research around breakdown product of matrices. And the breakdown product of matrices tends to be the point at which they see activity and the response in the wound. So hydrolyzed collagen jumps ahead in that processing because it's been processed, and therefore is able to activate those wounds towards healing.
Can you provide some commentary on revenue from the Cook Biotech products year to date?
I don't believe we've shared any of that yet, Mike,
Okay.
or anybody else that wants to field that.
No, we haven't.
Just looking through the questions here. Does Medicare and or private insurance reimburse wound diagnostics? If not, how do you plan to get clinicians to adopt the technology?
Yeah, there are already codes and coverage that have occurred for some of the diagnostic tools out there for identification of infection. So we believe that CMS is very much in tune with making sure that a diagnostic will get the appropriate reimbursement. So yeah, we do believe that that's forthcoming. We also just see a trend in Medicare. Medicare knows that the fee-for-service world is not where they benefit, and you're seeing more and more dollars pushed towards the Medicare Advantage plan and bundled arrangements. And there's been a lot of dialogue out of CMS and also the MACs that are associated with CMS that are saying that the future is going to be in value-based care. And so we see that coming.
So how do you think about growth versus profitability, and along with that, the need to potentially raise more money?
Yeah, today I think I know we have stated publicly that we want to be cash flow neutral, and that we plan to be cash flow neutral by the end of the first quarter. And from our perspective, the need for capital would arise as it relates to identified opportunities that would require additional capital to purchase those. But from where we are today, we've got such great penetration coming out of our Accelerate product line, and continued growth in the states that we're in, and also within those states, but external states that haven't reached that $50,000 market yet. That provides us a lot of leverage from the standpoint of being able to reduce that overhead as a percentage of the total. And again, as I said earlier, the wound derm platform has not been formally introduced into the marketplace from the standpoint of creating revenue, and that will take that will leverage that overhead as well, and get that taken care of. So that's our plan. Our plan is get wound derm commercial, continue to expand our surgical products.
Going from approvals for Accelerate on individual hospital basis to selling more hospital systems, does it make sense that the percentage of hospitals ultimately sold into goes down as it isn't as high touch?
Yeah, I think that'd be, I'd have to contemplate that a bit, but I believe what you're saying is that we would have maybe outpace by approvals than we will necessarily where we have people. And I think that's true. We use this as a marker to deploy. So the great thing is it opens up markets for us. So suddenly we may have a state or a city that we've never been able to maybe access. And, you land a large system and suddenly there's a new hospital available for sale for us to sell in. And so that allows us to open that market. So I do think that maybe as a percentage, I could see us accessing, I guess is maybe a good word, or selling into a lower number relative to approvals. But that's a great problem to have, and I'm excited to have it. And so we would just be able to deploy, and we'd probably be able to be urged to deploy faster.
And we had another question come in. When you look at being cash flow positive potentially by the end of Q1 of 23, do you think you can get there, strictly from, core Accelerate growth and product growth, or do you need wound derm contribution?
Well, if you're going to have, the burden of the cost of the wound derm platform, when you look at everything that we've got there, if it weren't generating any revenue, we would look at alternative things to do with that solution. And surgery by itself would be surgery by itself and be it would be a completely different picture from my perspective.
And I just add, with the addition of the other products, the fixed cost leverage that we have in there and the great talent we have in there. When I say in there, in the hospitals, there's an opportunity there to really add a lot of additional revenue. And we're just looking for products and adding products that make sense to go with Celerate. Celerate's an unbelievably great lead product. And then we just need those complementary products. So in every surgery, there's 2 products being used potentially or more.
Yeah.
Another question was, are there additional potential product acquisitions like the one you just did with Scendia?
If you, the wound space is fertile ground for potential acquisitions. So, we have no shortage of opportunities that we review, but we're very selective on what we do, by evidence of the Scendia acquisition, which we think is a tremendous acquisition. So if we're going to acquire something, we don't want it to be a science project. We want it to be a revenue generator.
Mm-hmm. Maybe last question. This is a very open, general question. What worries you?
The list is too long, but that's only because I've been making investments for my entire career, and I don't worry. What I do is plan. And I tell people this all the time. I'm always looking at what are the alternatives, what could happen, and what would we do if that event happened, so that you're never under the gun. You already have a solution laid out, and how would you address it. So it's really more, you also have to think of it this way. If a market goes down, there's typically tons of opportunity from people that are over leveraged, etc. And that creates a buying opportunity. So I don't look at downturns and concerns near as much from the standpoint of what keeps me awake at night, because I sleep just fine because I like planning. Okay, so that's really more the process. And Zach is the same way, and our whole team is geared towards that. We don't sit around being worried about something. We just do a lot of planning.